The wind howled like a wounded creature as the train pulled into the dusty station of Elmridge, Montana. Abigail Wren stepped down, her gloved hand gripping the iron rail, her eyes scanning the empty platform with a mixture of nervousness and hope. She had never been west of Chicago, never met the man who was supposed to greet her, and never imagined she'd be standing alone in the middle of nowhere, clutching a worn suitcase with everything she owned in the world.
Oh.
A new life awaited her at least that's what the letters had promised. The ad had read, "Widower seeks strong, gentle-hearted woman to help raise his children and keep a peaceful home. Must be patient, kind, and not afraid of hard work. Will provide shelter, food, and companionship. No dowry needed." It wasn't romantic. It was practical. But Abigail, 29 and long deemed a spinster by society, had no illusions left. What she wanted was not a fantasy. She wanted a place to belong, a family to care for, and someone to need her. So, when the letters came, sweet with rough grammar and honest words signed by James Harrow, she believed them. She believed him. But James Harrow did not come to meet her. No carriage waited at the station. No strong-jawed rancher with calloused hands and children in tow. Just a station master who scratched his beard, tipped his hat, and pointed toward a path leading through the woods. "Heard tell James had himself a wife, Cooman?" "Reckon that's you?" he said, voice lined with tobacco and thyme. "Go on up that trail yonder. Big farmhouse." But he hesitated, voice lowering. "Prepare yourself, miss. Things ain't quite what you might be expecting." Abigail's boots crunched against the brittle leaves as she walked the mile toward the house. The sun dipping low behind the hills, her breath fogged before her, anxiety gripping her stomach like a tightening fist. Faded white farmhouse with chipped paint and crooked shutters, she saw them. 7 pairs of eyes, peeking through the windows. 7 children, no man. When she knocked on the door, it didn't swing open to a warm welcome. It creaked slowly, revealing a boy, no older than 12, standing barefoot on creaky wooden floors. His clothes were patched and threadbare, but his eyes were sharp. "You're the mail-order lady?" he asked. Abigail nodded, unable to find her voice. He stepped aside and she walked in, heart thudding. The house smelled of wood smoke, flour, and something sour underneath. It was lived in, cluttered with books, toys, and laundry, but there was no adult in sight. Only the children, ranging from a squalling toddler to a stoic girl of maybe 15 all, looking at her like she was both a stranger and a miracle. "I'm Henry." The boy said, "Ma died 3 winters ago. Pa said he was bringing a new lady to help us, but what?" Abigail whispered. "He left 3 months ago. Said he was going to work a job in Butte. Never came back. Might be dead. Might just not care." Abigail felt the weight of 7 pairs of eyes in a silence, so heavy it made her knees weak. She sat her suitcase down, pulled off her gloves, and did the only thing she could think to do. She rolled up her sleeves and started making dinner. The days that followed were surreal. Abigail kept expecting someone to arrive, a neighbor, the Sheriff James himself, but no one came. The children, wary at first, began to test her boundaries. The toddler, Rosie, cried for her mama at night. The twins, Sammy and Sarah, fought constantly. The older ones, Henry and 15-year-old Beatrice, watched her every move, trying to determine if she'd stay or leave like all the others. Apparently, a few aunts and neighbors had passed through, tried to help, but none had lasted more than a week. But Abigail wasn't like the others. She didn't leave, she stayed. She mended socks. She wiped tears. She taught the children their letters and how to make biscuits without burning them. She fixed the back step, read bedtime stories, braided hair, and kissed foreheads. In the quiet moments, when the children were asleep, she sat by the fire and read James' old letters. It had been sweet, full of longing and honesty, but now they felt like ghost stories. Was he alive? Was he ever who he said he was? One cold evening, a neighbor named Mrs. Tillman stopped by with a basket of preserves and a warning. "You're a saint, miss, but saints get burned too. That man Jamesy had debts, enemies, made bad choices. Word is he ran off to Canada to avoid a jail sentence. Abigail said nothing. She simply looked out the window at the children playing in the snow. They need someone, she said finally, and I have no one else to need me. Weeks turned into months. Christmas came with pine boughs and paper snowflakes. Abigail made a goose out of chicken and baked a cake so dry they laughed over it for days. The children began to smile more. They clung to her skirts. They called her Ma when they forgot themselves, and she didn't correct them. One snowy afternoon, Beatrice came into the kitchen with a crumpled letter. It was from James, sent from a mining camp across the border. Short, uncaring, and final. Abe, I ain't coming back. Tell the kids I'm sorry. I ain't fit to be a father. You're better off without me. Abigail folded the letter and burned it in the stove. That night, as she tucked little Rosie in and kissed her forehead, she whispered, "You are not unwanted. You are not alone." Then came the fever. It started with Sarah, a cough, a wheeze, then a hot forehead and shallow breathing. One by one, the children fell sick. Abigail didn't sleep. She boiled water, brewed herbs, held trembling hands, and sang lullabies through the night. She collapsed once, fainted from exhaustion, but rose again when Henry shook her awake. "We need you," he whispered. "Please don't go." In that moment, something inside her broke open. She wasn't just playing a role anymore. She was their mother. When the fever broke, when the children healed and began to giggle again, Abigail stood at the window, tears streaming down her face, and knew something sacred had happened. They had become a family not by blood, but by choice. That spring, Abigail took a job teaching at the town school. Beatrice helped with the chores, Henry began carving furniture, and the others flourished under the routines of home and care. The townspeople, once skeptical, now smiled and waved. Some called her brave, some called her foolish. She didn't care. All she knew was she had come to Montana with nothing but a suitcase and a heart full of hope. Found more love than she ever imagined. When the children gathered around the dinner table one Sunday, holding hands before the meal, "Henry," said Grace. His voice cracked halfway through. "Thank you for Miss Abigail, who came when nobody else would. Thank you for giving us a real ma. Amen." Abigail looked at the faces around her, freckled, wild, kind. Messy Ann felt her chest swell with joy. They were hers now, and she was theirs. Spring passed, and summer painted the Montana hills in wildflowers and golden light. Abigail had transformed the broken, half-forgotten Harrow farmhouse into something living warm. Noisy, cluttered with mismatched shoes and secondhand books, full of life and laughter. There was always a pot simmering on the stove, always something baking, always a child asking a question or offering her a dandelion like it was treasure. Yet underneath the joy, a quiet fear pulsed in her chest. What if someone came to take them away? The law hadn't come, not yet. But she wasn't technically their guardian. She was still on paper. Mail-owed her bride to a man who had vanished. No marriage certificate, no legal standing. Just love. And sometimes love wasn't enough. The first twist came in the form of a letter from the county courthouse. Beatrice handed it to Abigail with trembling fingers. "It's from the judge," she said. "Are they going to separate?" "Us." Abigail's heart dropped. She unfolded the paper, hands stiff. It was a summons. The town had finally taken notice. There would be a hearing. Someone had reported that the Harrow children were living under the care of a woman who was not a blood relative, not their legal guardian, not even a widow. Just a woman who showed up with a suitcase and stayed. The hearing was set for 2 weeks. "Don't want to leave you?" little Rosie cried that night. "Don't let them take us away." "I won't," Abigail whispered, clutching the child to her chest. "Even if I have to stand in front of 1,000 judges, I won't let you go. You're mine." That night, she cried for the first time in months, not because she was weak, but because her heart had become too full to contain the fear and love and worry all at once. In the days before the hearing, the town changed. People who once smiled politely now crossed the street. Whispers followed her in the market. A few gossips accused her of being an opportunist or worse, a squatter. Even some of the mothers at the schoolhouse who once brought her pies and praised her patience turned cold, but kindness showed up in unlikely places. Mrs. Tillman, the elderly neighbor with the sharp tongue, arrived one morning with a bundle of neatly pressed clothes and said, "You'll need to look respectable in court. And don't worry, child. We know what you've done for those young'uns. You're not alone." Pastor Wright stopped by with his Bible and a quiet smile. "You've done the Lord's work here, Abigail, and sometimes that's not neat or official. But it's true." Even Henry, barely 13 and awkward in his growing limbs, stood tall one night and said, "I'll speak in court. I'll tell them how you saved us." She shook her head gently. "You shouldn't have to fight like that, Henry." "Not a boy anymore," he said. "You made me strong." The day of the hearing arrived, with a sky full of storm clouds. Abigail wore a navy blue dress borrowed from Mrs. Tillman and a hat Beatrice had stitched with trembling fingers. She held Rosie's hand as they walked into the courthouse, the other children trailing behind like ducklings. Inside the courtroom, the judge, a gray-haired man with kind but weary eyes, asked the children to wait outside. Abigail stood alone at the front. A social worker, rigid and cold, read aloud a report filled with half-truths. No official marriage certificate on file, no blood relation. Children have been without legal guardianship for nearly a year. Living arrangements unconventional. Then it was Abigail's turn. She stood behind the wooden podium and took a breath so deep she felt it in her bones. "I came here expecting a husband," she said, voice steady. "What I found was 7 scared, hungry children. Their father abandoned them. He lied to all of us, but I stayed. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to, because they needed someone, and I needed them." She paused, swallowing emotion. "I don't have documents. I don't have wealth, but I have love. Every day I wake up and care for them. I cook their meals, I teach them, I sit by their beds when they're sick. I know their favorite colors, their secret fears, their dreams. I know what calms Rosie's nightmares and how Henry pretends not to cry when he misses his mother. I am not their blood, but I am their mother." Silence fell over the room like a soft blanket. The judge leaned forward. "And you want legal custody of all 7 children?" "I do," she said, "for as long as they'll have me." They called the children in, one by one. Beatrice went first, head high, eyes firm. "She gave us our lives back. She didn't have to, but she did. She's our real ma." Henry followed, fumbling through his testimony, but ending with, "She made me believe in people again." Even the littlest ones spoke in their own simple, heart-piercing ways. Rosie climbed into Abigail's lap and clung to her. "Don't take me away," she said to the judge. "She smells like cookies and hugs." The courtroom broke into soft laughter, and even the judge's eyes softened. After 2 hours, the judge asked Abigail to step outside. She waited in the hallway with the children huddled close. Rain began to patter against the windows, and thunder rolled in the distance. Finally, the doors opened. "Miss Wren," the judge called. She stood, shaking. "In light of your unwavering dedication, community support, and the children's own testimonies, the court is prepared to grant you full guardianship, effective immediately." The children let out gasps and cheers. Abigail covered her mouth, tears streaming freely now. Beatrice threw her arms around her, then Henry, then all of them in a tangle of arms and joy. The judge gave her a kind nod. "It's not always the ones born to us who become family. Sometimes it's the ones who choose us." That night, back at the farmhouse, the children decorated the kitchen with paper chains and wildflowers. They baked a lopsided cake and called it their Forever Day. Beatrice wrote a sign that read, "The Renjero Family, EST, Today Later." As the stars blinked above the Montana fields, Abigail sat on the porch wrapped in a blanket. Henry joined her, holding 2 mugs of warm milk. "You ever regret coming here?" he asked quietly. She looked at him, the boy who had opened the door with suspicion and now sat beside her with trust. "Never," she said. "This is exactly where I was meant to be," and deep down, she knew it. Given her what she expected, it had given her something far more precious: a home, a purpose, a family, and most of all, love.